And we are live with our 36th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson, known as @CKTricky on Twitter, and Santa's helper this year, joined by my co-host, Seth Law. Seth, say hi.
At Seth Law on Twitter. Apparently it's Aunt Santa Tricky now. Is that what we're going for?
Yeah. I'm gloriously ready for Christmas this year. So it's going to be amazing.
I was expecting an ugly sweater, but apparently we just wear wreaths as necklaces, right? This is like a Flava Flav.
I take what we do here very seriously in this podcast, and I think that this outfit demonstrates that perfectly.
Perfect. Now, I think a part of that is that we've got Mike McCabe joining us tonight. Mike, go ahead and say hi.
Hi, I'm Mike McCabe at McCabe615. Nothing too creative for Twitter, unlike you guys.
Unlike me, and
yours is Seth Law. It's literally Seth Law.
Yeah, but his last name is Law. You can basically make anything out of that, and it'd be good.
Bob blah blah was a
yeah. So for Seth keeps changing his Twitter name, and it's confusing. So can you just stop doing that?
And if you don't. Yeah, and I should explain. Every year I've known Mike for quite some time. Seth's known Mike for quite some time, and ever since I've known Mike, he's not been the biggest fan of people putting up Christmas decorations pre Thanksgiving. So this glorious festivity setup is specifically for in honor of Mike's podcast appearance this evening.
Yeah, you look like a sale at Michael's. That's what you look like.
Well, thank you. I take that as a compliment.
Yeah,
appreciate that.
You are the $5.99 bin at Michael's right now.
Oh well, I'm not cheap though. Let's not go too far. So, on a like I said, taking things really seriously here. On a serious note, Mike is so. Let's talk about Mike for a second. So Mike has spoken at AppSec Cali. He's spoken at LastCon. He's done B-sides. He's spoken at B-sides. And I think Mike, what's interesting about your background is that you've worked at places like LivingSocial, which, you and I worked there together. That was a really move fast, break all the things, never fix it, and kind of place. And all the way to having built a consulting team, and you and your glorious Gantt charts and doing, both building out the practice, like the technical practice, what's delivered by the practice to managing the team and things like that, to having done enterprise security level work at a big financial Capital One. And now you own your own firm, MBM Consultants. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
Right. So I think you have some stories to share. That's why obviously we had you on the podcast. So I think we'll just jump right into it, because Seth, we don't have an AppSec minute this week, do we?
Not necessarily, right? I mean, we could probably talk a little bit. One thing I've been dealing with recently is the kind of the difference, Burp recently are a lot of like the difference between cross-site scripting and input validation or input reflection. Right? I don't know if you've dealt with that a lot, Mike. I'm sure you've seen it in Burp Suite recently, right?
Talking about if it classifies something as just not being validated, or are you talking about it calling it cross-site scripting?
Well, I'm talking about, how it's basically one and the same vulnerability, but it's just the exploitation is limited in one case, right? So you've got cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. You can get your pop-up because it's HTML. Your browser recognizes it as HTML, versus, something that's like JSON. It makes an XML HTTP request and it comes back as blob and it contains HTML characters, but it never gets executed, or you don't necessarily get the pop-up. So Burp classifies it as, it's confirmed that there is a vulnerability there, that, this data has not been encoded, but it doesn't necessarily equate to full cross-site scripting, so the severity isn't as high, right? And I keep going back and forth, right? Sometimes I usually include that in my reports. I'm not sure about the two of you because it is an input validation problem and it can result in cross-site scripting, but it's not necessarily confirmed cross-site scripting. So I kind of wanted your thoughts on, hey, I mean, is it something that should be called out, or is it something that, we could just ignore because it is all JSON encoded?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been on the side of being a little more cautious, just in the sense of even if it's not a problem now, it could be a problem in the future. I mean, you can have a lot of bad things that aren't necessarily exploitable right now, but some change in the front end code, and that does become cross-site scripting. So, I mean, I always think you should treat things securely at the back end. So whatever you send in should be validated. Whatever you get back should be, encoded properly. So, I know most front end frameworks like Angular and React do templating encoding, so you can't, in theory, get cross-site scripting without disabling some functionality. But I don't know. I've always thought you should, have good inputs and outputs. So it makes sense just from building it securely now, so it doesn't become a problem in the future, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. Ken, what are your thoughts on that?
If you don't validate your input, I'll watch you in your dreams. I don't know. On a serious note, yeah, I agree with what you guys said. I have nothing further to add besides scaring people with this.
You need to be controversial
on the shelf.
Yeah.
No.
No, I like the one. Okay, so the one thing that I wanted to call out, Mike, that you said is that, hey, it's got to be output encoded, and like when I look at JSON output encoding, it doesn't necessarily mean that you output encode the greater than or the less than sign. Although I agree, from an HTML perspective, that's got to be handled. I almost think it falls more on the input validation side than it does on the output encoding side, because it isn't being checked as it comes in. But so I can go both. Well, yeah, I go back and forth, I guess is what I'm saying, as far as where I classify it. But I do agree that the input as it comes in should be validated. So I guess that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, it's become so complex now. It used to be just input and output, and if something ended up in HTML or JavaScript, and whether it was encoded or not, that meant it was exploitable.
Yeah.
But now with frameworks and how much manipulation goes on with the data from the back end, it's hard to say, what's actually going to happen. So a lot of times it'll be perfectly safe, and a lot of times it will go through some transformation or get, put into some custom code that then makes it exploitable. So yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, better safe than sorry, but it all depends on the use case.
There's no golden rule. It's contextual, and yeah, have a CSP. Can't stress that enough. Have a CSP.
Yeah, have a CSP. There you go. The InfoSec wonderland that is GitHub.
You're probably going to screw it up. You're probably going to screw up getting it. You're definitely going to introduce XSS at some point, most likely, right? So have a CSP to be your backup there.
Yeah,
those
definitely.
Are my thoughts.
Yeah, I found cross-site scripting in some header tag recently, or I think it was a host tag that got displayed back in, and then it was in JSON, but they didn't tag it as JSON in the response headers, right? So those are the kind of issues that can exist and that can come from it. So anyway, yeah. Sorry, I guess I did derail into an AppSec minute or an AppSec 5 minutes. So anyway,
it's all AppSec related. We can derail it as much as we want. Obviously, it's a super professional podcast.
I don't know how seriously I can take you today.
Yeah, but is that any different from any other day? I just have more decorations now. So, yeah. So, Mike, let's talk about you, buddy.
Sure.
No, but let's talk about your origin story. Obviously, I know quite a bit about you. But can you share, how you went from sort of, why you got into security is always one of the most interesting. How you got there is interesting, but why you decided to go into security is always a really interesting thing. How far you knew that? Did you as a kid? Were you picking things apart? So yeah, those two kind of questions. How did you get into security, and when did you know that you wanted to do security, and why? And were there any signs that you're gonna end up in security?
Yeah. So I mean, career-wise, I started in more of the DevOps world. It was before it was really called DevOps. It was writing Perl that runs code on AIX servers that makes money and code move around. So it was not DevOps. It was not Terraform and Chef and Puppet and stuff like that. And that was kind of where I got my start spending time on Linux servers. And security wasn't a big focus in that organization. It was a government contractor. Surprise, surprise. But yeah. Then yeah, I went to LivingSocial with you, worked on AppSec stuff and a whole lot of other stuff.
But between that transition, like why would you want to work with me? I mean, no, but like why would you want to kind of go into that route?
I mean, I always even before well, in college I studied security, and before that I wanted to go into security. I think it's because like accounting, there's no adversarial model, like you just look at some numbers in a spreadsheet. Same thing with business, MBAs. I mean, a little bit with business competition, but security is one of the few places besides maybe like law enforcement where there's an adversarial model where you're constantly under some kind of attack or some kind of, negative focus. And so that's a really interesting concept. So you have like the tech side, which is tech is always advancing. There's always new things happening. So you have like the things moving super fast. And at the same time, you have to take that tech and somehow secure it. And you have to, you're up against a lot of smart people who want to hack you. So I think that's what got me most interested in security. And I always just liked breaking stuff when I was younger, and so kind of fit into it. I wasn't some like super hacker when I was younger, but definitely used like AOL on the old AOL days.
You still use AOL?
I mean, I still use AOL, yeah, but that was back in the day with the old like hacker tools on AOL, kicking people out of chat rooms and macro bombs and mail bombs and all that stuff. So it was always fun messing with that because it was a way like you can break the system and do something you're not supposed to do.
I used to hate when people do that macro bomb stuff. Like, oh my, you're talking about when like you'd end up with like 50,000 over and over again pop-ups on your screen to where like your computer was unusable.
Well, that or the macro bombs, which is like the ASCII art getting dumped into chat rooms.
Oh yeah. Kind of stuff drove me nuts. It was like somebody would get mad on the internet, or just it's probably you. It's probably you that was doing it to me even back then.
And now people just DOS each other off the internet or SWAT each other. So it's elevated quite a bit.
That was an escalation. It was quite an escalation.
So yeah, that's why I wanted to get into security, just because that model pretty much only exists in security, unless you're like in law enforcement or the military or intelligence or something like that. So that's always what's been interesting, just the combination of tech and that kind of the issues you deal with in security.
Yeah, it's not simple. I mean, we're sitting here talking about XSS still, and it's been like, how long has XSS been a thing? And it's still a thing.
Yeah.
Not getting solved any.
It will continue to be a thing until Neil is cloned from GitHub and one exists at every single organization in the world to implement CSP. XSS will be a thing, and even then, like CSP is bypassable, and it's not.
Well, according to Manico, right? Aren't we at the we're almost to that golden like framework standard, and XSS will disappear, right? Isn't that what he said?
Well, let me say this: Rails 5, I think, or the latest iteration of Rails actually, and I know everybody's rolling their eyes. Oh, this guy with his Rails, but
people still use that.
I know, right?
I thought PHP replaced that.
That's hurtful. That's hurtful.
Wait, you say people still use it? Yes, GitHub still uses it. That's right. Is that?
There are at least 5 of us.
There are 5 of us. Come join us.
Of us. Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, say what you will, ha ha ha, at my expense, but they did implement basically that. So Neil had written secure headers, so they basically put that into the framework so that it like you can just through the framework do all the security centric headers, including CSP. So, hey, at least Rails has that going for it.
Yeah. Does it have a default policy it comes with, or is it just you just can enable it?
Oh, I think it does. I think a default. I can't remember what it is though.
I'm gonna guess if you look at every first few commits of any new Rails project, it's gonna be disabling that.
The first 3 commits.
Somebody's gonna be like, why does my front end not work? Oh, that's why.
We spent 8 hours on naming this app. Now for the easy stuff, disabling the content security policy.
That's probably the top question on Stack Overflow for Rails right now, right?
Yeah.
Oh God, I hope not. Traditional CSP approach. I don't know. Like, I don't want to read all this stuff right now. Plus, it's hard with all these Christmas decorations. But yes,
you're distracted. Do we need to sing Jingle Bells before we move on?
That'll be our intro theme song. I'll get us a Christmas theme song. We'll finally have one. That mythical theme song we've talked about.
Yes, it'll only be appropriate for a month and a half, but we'll use it year round.
At least you're starting early. You still have a good amount of time. You can get out of it.
I can do it year round. That's not a problem.
Oh,
and
God.
anytime you're on, Mike, and anytime you're on.
Yeah, I'm gonna report you to the YouTube police.
Oh God, they would be bored out of their minds trying to watch this. You should do. It would be more hurtful to them than me. So, yeah. So you came to LivingSocial, and from there you obviously went to several. You did several other things, and I'm curious what out of well, first of all, tell folks what those other things were, and then have some follow-on questions regarding what was good, what was bad, lessons learned from some of those positions.
Sure, Santa. Yeah, so after LivingSocial, I was there for almost 2 years, worked with you for a while. That was a good experience, I'll say that. It was an inexperience and good experience. I think everyone should work at a startup at some point in their life, especially if you've only worked at large companies. You should definitely go to a startup for a year or two. After that, I went into consulting. So I was at MBM for 2 years. Again, worked with you and met Seth. And yeah, like you said, worked there, helped build out the consulting side of the house. We went from 5 folks when I joined, 5 or maybe 10 folks when I joined, up to 25. So that was, again, an interesting experience. And that wasn't purely AppSec experience. That was also just building a whole organization and building a company and all the fun and bad of doing that. And then I switched from more of a management role at MBM to just being a pure consultant at Stratum, which is another smaller AppSec focused consulting company in Virginia. There I mostly just did, just pure consulting, AppSec work, source code review, dynamic testing, training, all that kind of stuff. And also worked on building a product that was being built out in-house there. So that was really interesting because that was, again, that was kind of like working in a startup because it's limited resources trying to build something, and they're trying to build a security product. So that was really just interesting seeing how to do that the right way. Yeah, then after that, I went to Capital One, and I worked in a unique role there because it wasn't a purely technical role. It was more of, they have a concept of the Information Security Office, which they're kind of like mini CISOs for different either business units or even teams within the larger business units. And the idea is they kind of tie the different pieces of the security organization together, and then you're the face of the business. So, if AppSec did a test, we'd be the ones who are kind of on the hook to help enforce getting those findings done. We'd be on the phone explaining to them why white hat sucks, and all that kind of stuff. So that was really interesting, just because that was more of like talking to the business about security versus a purely technical role. And anyone who's worked at a bank knows that A, there's a huge amount of work to get done, and B, security is usually bad. Not saying that's true about Capital One, but they're just these two competing things. And then after being there for a while, spending a good amount of time doing cloud security and just general security there, decided to start my own thing, which I've been doing for a while now, and just focused on cloud security and application security. So far, it's been really good. I've been really busy, and I've been working with some small clients, which is a lot of fun because working with developers who haven't really done anything security related and are kind of afraid of what that means. it's kind of fun to be the first face of security, so that you don't have to. So you're not the one who's like spoiling security for them, because everyone who has worked with an enterprise security company at some point just learns to hate them because they're usually jackasses and, are just yelling at them to fix their app. So it's nice working with kind of greenfield app teams who are open to ideas and, try not to be an asshole to them and show that security doesn't have to be just horrible and doesn't have to be just insulting their baby. So
that's a security motto you're saying, is we should just like, don't be an asshole. That
would be good. Yeah. So I tweeted the other day because I was at a client and the CTO introduced me to like his developers, and he was like, "Yeah, this is Mike. He's going to be doing a security test for us." And like, they all kind of like froze up. They all kind of looked at me like suspicious. And I was like, that's like, I mean, I don't blame them. They don't know me, but they just hear security and they're like, yeah, this guy is going to tell us our app sucks and it's going to create a bunch of work for us. And it's just going to be, this guy is, the embodiment of a headache. And
just sighed when you walked in. Oh, this guy.
And
but that's just how things are, that's based off of their previous work with security and just the fact that we're pains in their asses. So it's not like a surprise that, developers don't generally like when we walk into the room, or don't generally like having to jump on a phone and talk about testing their app.
I have a couple of questions. Number one, was it PHP? Because like they kind of get what they deserve, right? Is that?
No, it's Rails. So no one to blame.
So it was one of the two other firms that.
Yeah. So, like you said, Ken, there's dozens.
There are dozens of us.
So yeah, no, I mean, like, they're a pretty new product company. They have some like savvy developers, but they just they already had a bad view of security. So I get to undo that with them and prove that not everyone's an asshole. Just Ken.
Just me. Well, no, I mean, you're right though. Like, it's interesting when people, you've had somebody else in there, and then what they've done is they've thrown like a 700-page report from a scanner, or all the typical bad stuff that you shouldn't do, right? As somebody who's done this for a living for a while, there are certain things that you cringe when you hear other people do it, and then it's a reality that if you're doing consulting and you're going through, like, there's going to be a percentage of these companies that dealt with the worst versions of us in this community, and sadly you have to work through that and kind of it's no different than like when people like are suspicious when like a legitimate mechanic says like, oh, something, this actually has to be replaced, or something wrong here with your car. You're like, okay, well, I've been lied to in the past, and they made me spend $500 and have to spend, or whatever the case is. So it's pretty similar.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other big problem, and this is this was definitely reaffirmed working at a large enterprise recently, is everything is critical and everything needs to get done right now. Like, it's basically critical A, critical B, critical C. It's not like, things aren't accurately judged for risk. And so, some developers aren't aware of like what the actual security impact is of a finding, but some of them, they're perfectly aware that this is like not exploitable, and it's only exploitable under these like certain conditions, but yet they're being forced to fix it in lieu of like, getting other work they want to get done. So, just, it's frustrating that basically if you're trying to be a good guy in security and trying to be a reasonable person in security, you have to clean up after the previous folks that have worked with them. So.
Yeah, that totally happens. Seth, do you have, because I have some questions. I don't know if I didn't want to interrupt your set of questions before, because I know some of Mike's opinions, and I definitely want other people to hear them, because I think he's got some good insights, but I don't know if you had anything before I moved on.
Yeah, I just wondered, what pair of jeggings he was wearing today, because that seems to be
the skekkies.
I will not be standing up. Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah. Stay sitting. I think we would prefer that.
Yeah.
Mike likes.
It's cold
Mike
down
likes
here,
really.
so.
Yeah, Mike likes really tight jeans and craft beer, and being ironic.
And
moonlight
walks on the beach. So
he's a hipster, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, the guy that works at GitHub calls me a hipster.
Who wears V-necks.
Yeah,
that's true.
I didn't actually know people wore those as actual shirts until I met you.
What do you think they wear them as?
Like undershirts or something, or just in catalogs. No one actually bought them.
Well, I'm pretty sure, you know, he's probably wearing a tank top underneath his hoodie. So just back off a little.
He's gotta regulate the body heat, you know.
That's legitimately a tank top underneath.
Told you. I told you.
Oh my
So
God,
professional.
he called it. I am the embodiment of a professional, sir.
Oh man.
This is going off the rails quickly.
Yeah, Mike, I was gonna ask. Okay, so you've been inside, you've been outside organizations. We've worked as consultants together. You know, me and Mike do work pretty closely. You know, both of us are independent right now, so we kind of kick stuff back and forth. What is your what's your ideal scenario? What is it that you like most? I guess currently, as far as, you know, helping clients, it sounds like the small company is something that you're high on right now. But anything else?
I don't know. I've been doing AppSec for a while. I mean, I've reviewed more Java code than I should. I don't know what's more traumatizing, that doll on Ken's tree or reading the amount of Java that I've read.
Oh, don't be sad.
It's
Java's
50,
not that bad.
I'm not sure which one yet. So I've done a lot of AppSec, and that's still kind of the bread and butter, like doing AppSec tests and stuff like that. But I think the more interesting stuff these days, and it's probably because I come from more of like an operations background, is cloud security. So infrastructure, automation, all that kind of stuff. So I've been doing more of that for folks recently. Security assessments, working with them to figure out how to improve how they do things in the cloud. I think most people, especially smaller companies who are greenfielding things, just kind of slap stuff together and they don't really think about the security side of it. Or if they do, they just don't. Having someone from the outside come and say, like, this is what you should do and here are your gaps, I think helps people to kind of firms up the idea that this is something they need to address. And so that's really, I think that's more interesting. I mean, cloud security is just like, it's a code issue. It's a, operating system level issue. It's a network level issue. It's encryption, everything, key management. So there's so many different pieces to it. And then there's all the, custom AWS or GCP kind of tools, Lambda, and then, containers. There's so many different pieces to it. And everyone's kind of set up a little bit differently. So it's been more interesting working in that side of things, getting back to kind of an operations viewpoint on stuff.
Okay. So what are your recommendations there, right? Like, where do you start with a company when it comes to that kind of stuff? I mean, obviously you go to some of those bigger companies like you've worked with in the past, and I'm sure they've got a team that's come up with, their cloud security standard. This is typically what I run into. But if you go to somebody small, what is the first thing that you do? What tools are you pulling out to actually help them?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one thing, I guess like with AppSec, you could say validate your inputs and that would kill a bunch of different bugs, or patch your software and that would kill a bunch of different bugs. With cloud, since there's so many different facets to it, there's no one recommendation that I think I can really make. So it's just so many different pieces to it. I mean, it all depends on what people are using. Working with like clients who are using ECS for containers, or people are just using Lambda for everything. Everyone has just a different kind of challenge. So I always just kind of dig into things, understand how it's all set up, and then write up specific recommendations for different issues. I mean, it seems to be kind of network infrastructure is always an issue. People just want to get EC2s going. They put them in a public subnet. They don't put good firewall or security groups in place.
But this is the thing, right? Like, I just to real quickly add to that, like there was a process previously in data centers to get like networking done and to have the ops, people actually set things up for you properly. And then like devs were just throwing code on top of the machines running in the data center, but all that networking, all that, there were like tiers of getting that set up, and DevOps like tore that down. But then and you had mentioned this, but now you've got developers writing that infrastructure as code. And then like, I don't know, like, do they have a great background in, not saying they don't, like but that's the question: is it the same level of networking knowledge and system and OS level knowledge as like and firewall knowledge as a somebody that's all they do?
That's an interesting take. Because I think about the organizations that I started with, like iOmega, right, back in the day, and that was such a defined process, rolling out new systems to support like the applications, and the developers had almost no say into how those systems were hardened, what was running on it. At most they would have, hey, this is the version of Tomcat that we've developed in, right, and that was it. But everything else was done by a dedicated team that knew the security. But I think about it now, and we haven't done the same thing with cloud security by any stretch, right? Some of the bigger orgs have, but the smaller ones, they don't hire a cloud security person or a cloud administrator. They just let the developers go off and go to town, right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because a developer used to just need to be an expert in, like, say, the language that they use, the framework, maybe database, how to optimize those kind of things, make sure their queries aren't, killing the database and all that kind of stuff. So now developers have to be an expert in all of that. They have to know Terraform or CloudFormation. They have to know, network level infrastructure. They have to know how to do key management in the cloud. And so they went from needing to be an expert in like a few different areas to now needing to be an expert in like a huge amount of other domains. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I think like DevOps is a good thing, and infrastructure as code is like a great thing because there's so much you can automate. But you're now asking your developers to be experts in all these different areas, and you're also asking them to have so much more responsibility to do all of this the right way. So it's I feel like kind of a recipe to be both really taxing on developers because they're already, I don't know any developer who's like just putting out 10 lines of code a week and that's all they do. Usually they're pretty taxed with what their normal job is, and now they have to do all the coding and also all of the infrastructure, and then debug that, and then figure out what the security team is requiring them to do with their Terraform scripts, and to figure out how to do key management and all these different things. So it's I think it's an opportunity to do things the right way, and it's an opportunity to make things more secure. But it's kind of, I think it's a little bit of a pipe dream to think like you implement cloud and DevOps and hand more responsibility over to developers and like things are just going to work out magically.
Wait, they're not going to work out magically.
Nah.
Don't believe you. Yeah, no, I mean, you're right though, because there's everything being sort of like, so everything from the database to whatever, like in-memory databases to however many like clusters of things that they have to run. Like there's a ton of different services that, I mean, it could be like using the notification services, email services, queuing services, whatever, right? And like there's a lot that can go wrong and be exploited if they get it wrong. So
yeah, I mean, how many cloud security people do you know? Like pure cloud security people that are qualified to talk about cloud security?
We've had just a few on yourself included. Scott Piper last week. We had Travis, but yeah, there's not like, it's kind of in fact, even if you would know, actually, I think Scott might have spoken to this too, but I think even the AWS security cert just came out like,
not recently. I think it was last year that you could actually start certifying for it. And I mean, you mentioned like Travis too, and Travis is more like he's creating tooling, but I don't know if he's got, and I don't know what sort of like level of expertise he has, like Scott Piper does, right? You're right. There's a dearth of people that are out there.
Yeah, and I mean, like just like frameworks and languages change all the time. Like we'll see what reInvent brings us because it's pretty much something new every single year, and new stuff comes out even outside of reInvent. So it's like, I don't know. It's a little crazy to think that developers are now responsible for infrastructure on top of app security. And we weren't doing that well just purely on AppSec. So now they have more responsibility. And clearly, you build guidelines, you build tools, you build frameworks for how people do this stuff. But not to be a dork like Ken and quote Peter Parker, but with great power comes great responsibility, and they don't get any more time to do this stuff. So it's just like, yeah, seems like a little bit of a cluster. It's like, it's a very promising thing, and clearly some places are doing it really well, but it's just not a surprise that it's a really, if you're in the middle where you don't have a huge team to help you build this stuff and you don't have the knowledge in-house, and you need to get it done, then I think that's where kind of the biggest pain point will be. If you're not really big and don't have dedicated resources for this type of security, I think it's got to be a lot of pain for companies. And Seth, I think you've had some experience in this area too, where you know, it's just people build standards, people build rules, they put it up in a wiki, and then somehow you have to figure out how to build against that, even if it's not very well defined. So
yeah, I mean, even the big companies are struggling with it, right? On, hey, what should be in that standard, what shouldn't be. And there's how many new cloud security tools that'll go in and tell you that you're doing everything wrong, or, you know, X, Y, and Z, or, you know, misconfigured, and, you know, what's the real risk associated with that. So it's a huge problem for large companies as well. But I do see, I mean, we had somebody, I don't know if it was in our Slack channel or another one that we're all in, that was talking about, hey, who's actually been punished for having cloud security problems, right? For exposing like S3 buckets. And I think we've got that one example of the company that they logged in and actually like encrypted everything or dropped everything, and they went out of business. But other than that, has anybody really suffered because of it, right?
yeah, there was some company that I read in the news that as part of their third-party audits, they talk about cloud security. And I think they're very specific about like S3 access and encryption. And they basically, there was some headline like touting this company because they pulled out of a deal with some third party because they didn't have the right like level of control over their S3 buckets. So it's kind of like touting the fact that this company takes their vendor very seriously. But I mean, I know working where I used to work, like auditors are just now catching up to kind of the cloud. Like, you know, auditors are going through the associate programs to get their certs, and then they're asking questions about this stuff. So you're going to see, I think, more of it over time. They're going to get smarter just like they do about everything else, but it's still going to be a little while before you have like good regulations around this stuff that make sense and actually make things more secure.
Yeah, and there's another factor, right? Like, surprise, surprise, kids, like only a small percentage of what actually happens gets reported, right? So like, basically, how many hours have companies spent on their cert teams and their legal teams and, you know, various parts of their company working on, you know, some simple misconfiguration, something kind of silly, stupid, whatever. And like, that they've spent a lot of money internally on resources working within the company to deal with whatever and figure out how, you know, the extent of the issue, and report it to various people that need to be reported to, and which is only going to get worse with GDPR. And so like, right, like that costs money. That's time not spent doing other things that are equally as important internally. So
yeah. There's an interesting comment that just came in. Toaster 32, I guess is his name, right? I mean, he called out that there's less than 3.5 hours of content on Amazon's site for the security specialty. I mean, that doesn't sound like anywhere near where it should be, right? I mean, if that's that's true, I'll try to get some links from him. But 3.5 hours to learn how to secure Amazon AWS is like, I mean, it takes 3.5 hours just to figure out like what an IAM rule is, right? And how to implement that. Like, I'm going to be honest, it does, right?
No, IAM is crazy. Yeah. I talked to someone at Cap One who passed the deal. I think he was the first guy at Cap One to go through that cert, and he said it was like heavy on IAM and KMS. So that's cool. Those are both super powerful and useful services, but like it's just going to scratch the surface of what you need to know to really secure cloud. So, and I mean, no cert's going to be perfect, but you know, it's.
But yeah, I mean, if it's heavy on IAM and KMS, right? You're leaving out VPCs, you're leaving out, security groups and like kind of the networking aspects. And maybe they're thinking that, hey, you've got to have the networking specialty to actually get into the security specialist. I don't know, right? Like I haven't done that much
Yeah.
research into it.
Yeah, plus
but-
doing monitoring and auditing and all that other stuff that like they have services built to help you out with, and you could totally use them. And then like, yeah, if it's mostly about IAM and KMS, like not super helpful.
No.
Yeah, I think it used to be that you had to have another cert before you could do it, but I think that recently changed. So now you can just jump in there. You can even take the, I think it's like the network specialty. So you can just be completely destroyed and pay however much it costs to take that cert. But because that's like one of their hardest certs to get, is the network specialty, I believe. So it used to be you had to have an associate or something like that. Then you could take it. Now you can just jump in. So if you want to waste $100-something, go for it.
So Toaster and Ken Toller both made a comment that, yeah, like most of that sort of general network security stuff appears to be in their associate level certs, certs and training. So,
yeah.
And also he asked, are either of you guys going to be at reInvent?
Only virtually.
It's still up in the air for me. I mean, Vegas is pretty close to where I'm at, so but I've got a ton of work that's in my pipeline, so I don't think I'm going to make it, but maybe we'll see. If somebody's out there and wants to meet up, hit me up on Twitter. Maybe we can make something happen.
I'm not going because I don't have a reason to, but and also it's super pricey. If it wasn't, if like I had a reason to go, or you know what I mean, like if that was part of my day to day, I'd totally do it. But it's not anymore. So,
well, I hear Lambda is going to be based on Rails now. Would that make it?
Ha 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 ha! You know what? I do think they support
Fake news.
Ruby.
They do. They do support Ruby.
Yeah.
I'm just
Guys are so mean.
Is there anyone that actually uses it? By the way, if you haven't read that blog post from Cloudflare about their worker stuff, it's pretty interesting. Speaking of Lambda, it's definitely worth a read because what they're doing with workers is pretty interesting. Like basically getting rid of the whole OS layer to run your code and getting rid of the cold boot problem and everything. So if anyone wants an interesting read for the week, definitely check that out. Evan from Cloudflare.
That was interesting. I mean, I'm not sure what technology they're. I mean,
it's running V8. It's running V8 at the.
Right.
Yeah, so it's V8 at the bottom. So it's basically, yeah.
Is it real URLs for AMP cached content using Cloudflare workers?
No, I'll send you the link. But it's about like sort of a comparison between workers and Lambda, and just talks about how like it can do a huge amount more. Run a huge amount more code with less resources because it's not doing the full virtualization like Lambda is. The only thing is like your isolation is now at the V8 level versus having an isolated Docker container or OS, things like that. So I'm not an expert in this area, but it was pretty interesting to see because
well, it was pretty interesting to read. Like I came up against I was doing a test on a system recently that used like some there's like webtask.io containers, right? But that's all, and it's all depending on that virtualization for the security of the content that they're pushing into it. It seems to work pretty well, but I'm extremely suspicious of anything that's like that'll still let you run custom code within a controlled environment, just because we know that it goes wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Tavis from Google this weekend was tweeting about it, so I'm sure he in his mad workshop is coming up with some like V8, breakout to read other people's memory or something like that. So like, I'm sure stuff like that will pop up, but I mean, we still use virtual machines, and there have been breakouts of virtual machines too. So it's not like it's going to completely destroy the model, but yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's not my field of expertise, but like the whole world of virtualization and putting code lower and lower to the operating system just to keep the resources and overhead lower. It's definitely interesting. Has its pros and its cons. So
yeah, we'll pull that link and then we'll post it for everybody. So because it was an interesting article when I read through it.
Yeah. Ken Toller did mention a Cloud Guru, which this is like this at least the third time that a Cloud Guru has been brought up for this is specifically because they have labs that are great for KMS and IAM bucket policies is what he says.
Yeah. Yeah, they have a lot of good stuff. They have actually Azure and GCP stuff too, if that's your you know, area of wanting to learn. The funny thing about Azure is, despite what some people think, I was completely surprised this week to learn that their revenue actually has beat AWS at certain quarters, which I'm curious to know how much of that is, like, what the margin is on that compared to AWS. Like, are they just throwing money to get more money? They're just giving free stuff away to get more people on the platform, and that's not going to work out long term. But it is interesting hearing from more clients that use Azure. I'm working with one that's like a .NET shop, and they're just all Azure, never use AWS. So there's more and more folks kind of popping up trying to figure out how you do Azure security. And while AWS, I wouldn't say is like mature in terms of security, in terms of the number of people who know how to do it, there's even less people when it comes to Azure. So that's going to be an interesting area of expertise to see grow. There's a really good talk
they
by
were offering like 50. Oh, sorry.
No, there's a really good talk by the Microsoft Red Team about pen testing Azure that I'll share with you. But it's kind of a different world than AWS, just because it's more that Microsoft world.
You are right. They were handing out heavy upgrade or heavy discounts to folks for moving from AWS to Azure.
Yeah,
but I don't know if that like
gonna last.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
So,
but so you're saying, like, if you're in the cloud security space and you want to be the expert, you should probably invest some time in learning Azure.
I mean, yeah, I think more and more people are gonna start using it, and some people are doing the whole multi-cloud thing of not wanting to be tied into one vendor, which, I feel like that's like, hey, we built our app on Rails, let's now go build it on Node and also Django, because we don't want to be locked into one framework. We haven't figured out how to do it well on one, let's go do it on three. But some people are just doing that because they don't want to be locked into AWS and get screwed over if the pricing becomes ridiculous, or don't want to be tied to their availability or something like that. So I know people are kind of doing both. I don't know many people using GCP, but they make $1 billion a year, so some people are using it.
Somebody's using it.
Yeah, I mean, you still run into people that are, any of those, so. I almost think there's space, like you're talking about, for somebody to sit in there and actually, hey, this is how you deploy in AWS versus GCP versus Azure, or, from a security perspective, they all seem like all the tools seem to support each of the three, or at least at some level they do, right? If you look at any of the cloud security vendors, but you really wonder on how deep they go on the Azure and GCP side, just because they don't have the same scrutiny or the same tooling as AWS. So,
yeah, I mean, call me a cynic, but like, I don't feel like the tooling for AWS is very good, and yeah.
Well, so. I mean, if it was good, Netflix wouldn't have to go build it all, right?
Yeah, they wouldn't have an entire security open source, part of GitHub. So,
yeah, yep,
yeah.
So I wanted to shift the conversation, if you guys don't mind, to
Christmas.
To Christmas.
Christmas, the holiday spirit that you all should have. I'm alone here on an island, guys. So, anyways, so one thing I definitely did want to ask about, because we've talked about this before, you and I, in private conversations, where we're like, the good and the bad, and you've seen quite a bit of bad, and you've seen good too, like in terms of like hiring people for AppSec, being able to recruit, but also like interview process specifically. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing, the good and the bad. Like what are the bad things you've seen as part of the interview process, and what are the good things? What are the things that people should be doing if they're trying to like hire on AppSec people?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think that's the hardest problem in security. We tackle a lot of issues in security, a lot of hard technical problems, but hiring, I think, has to be like one of the hardest things in our industry to do right, just because there's not enough people. I mean, I think I always like looking for folks that might not have the experience that they need out of the box. And this is especially hard in consulting, where basically you need someone to like start day one and start billing, because otherwise they're just costing you money. But I mean, we had good luck hiring folks that were very technical. They came from a different background than necessarily security. So someone who came from like a networking background, or you know, a lot of developers make good security folks, I think, because you don't have to teach them a whole domain of you know, application development and deployment and things like that. So I think that's a big help. But the big problem now, I think, is everyone knows that security is a place you can make a lot of money. So you have all these people flooding into it and getting their CEH or CISSP and things like that, and filling their resumes with all these different certs and saying they know. For some reason, people like to say they know Linux and like WP scan on their resume. Like that's going to be a selling point, that you know how to like use Linux and can run a command line tool. But that was really frustrating when I was doing hiring, of just the millions of crappy resumes that came in of people who just can fill their resume full of keywords but not know anything. And it's just gonna be more and more of that, as we need more security people, and there's way too many job openings and not enough good people, and there's good salaries in it. We'll see more of that, but it's really, I feel like you have to find the diamond in the rough when it comes to hiring for security, because you need someone who's technical and passionate and will take the time to learn and then continuously learn too. It's not like you learn how to do something once and then you're never improving after that.
So if you're reading a resume, what kind of like gets you in the, you know, in the, at least this is interesting resume, and not in the like move on pile to you? Like what sticks out to you usually as something that, you know, like this is what would make me want to hire someone, or at least, you know, not immediately dismiss the resume?
Yeah. Not being 5 pages long, because no one has that much experience. No, I think it's usually, it's like, what have you done outside of work? What have you done at work to learn more? And then what have you done outside of work to improve your skills? Because I think, like anything in life, if you want to be good at it, if you want to do it, you have to put a lot of effort into it. You know, no one's going to hire you to just sit there and learn something else. It's not your job. Like you have to do your day's worth of work, and then maybe you'll get some time to learn security. But for most people who aren't in it, they have to teach themselves. And so that means doing things like CTFs, or doing development, or, you know, going to trainings and paying for yourself, or just going to local conferences, or even speaking at conferences. So I think it's all those kind of extracurriculars that I think look pretty good on resumes. It just shows like a passion and an interest in the field. But I don't think it really matters what your background necessarily is. Like, I mean, you and me have worked with people who don't come from a purely technical background. We worked with someone who was a fireworks technician who, you know, ended up being a pretty good security guy. I believe he owns a nightclub in Miami now, but
He's doing some runs between Columbia and wherever he's at. Yeah, DC. So
yeah. But I mean, he didn't come from a purely technical background, but he learned AppSec and he brought the experience from different areas to AppSec. So I don't think, like, I think some people might think like if you don't have a security degree or you don't have a CS degree, you can't do AppSec or security in general. But I don't know. I've worked with plenty of people who don't have that. They just have a want to get better and a want to like learn more. And that's been better than anyone who's formally trained. I've also worked with people who have PhDs in security, and I don't think they know the difference between, like, you know, symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Couldn't tell you the difference between like reflected and stored XSS, but they have a formal degree in it. So yeah,
right, which I mean brings up the question of, okay, you've got these people in the room, so now it's time to try within that limited window that you have to you know, suss out if they truly, you know kind of what you're looking for. You know, we've talked about it before, like the write a TLS stack by hand in C++, you know, type trickery and those types of questions that are just bananas. Yeah. But like, you know, what are the ones that, what are the kinds of things that you ask people, and, you know, what are you really looking for there?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you pose an open-ended question, like how would you build this? How would you build like a simple API to call, to send some data somewhere, that someone could call? How would you do authentication? How would you protect against this on that API? Like, I think asking open-ended questions that you're not looking for a certain right answer. Like, you don't want to ask gotcha questions, just asking an open-ended question and then just like listening, just like shutting up and listening to the person and making them feel comfortable enough to, ramble on. And no one's going to have a perfect 10-word answer right out of the gate. They're going to have to think about it. Just giving people space to think and then trying to understand how they think and, what threat model they come up with for what they're building, what issues they think of, and how they solve for those issues. I think it's someone who can sit there and can think through a problem is definitely a big part of it. And I feel like if you do enough interviews with people, you can tell when someone's just BSing. Like, if you don't have the experience in the field, but you want to learn and you're going for, a more junior position, like there's nothing wrong with not knowing something. If you're going for a senior position where you need to be relied on to do like really quality work out of the gate, but you're lying about your, credentials or your experience, like people can usually pick up on that pretty quick. You ask a few basic questions and people know the stock answers, how do you address cross-site scripting, like output encoding. But then if you poke a little deeper, you'll know that they don't really know what they're talking about. So, so I don't know, like be honest with what you don't know, be honest with what you do know, and just, give people the space to talk through things. I think is important. So I think interviews that are like competitions and like gotchas and like trying to just rule people out are just kind of a terrible way to go about it. Interviews are nerve-wracking enough as they are without someone being like a dickhead and trying to prove that you don't know something.
No one's like, hey, tell me how to fix this XSS issue, or a bomb will go off in 20 seconds. There's no like MacGruber situations where you gotta, like do it under AppSec under pressure. So I agree. It always feels like a complete waste of time to be like, oh, how well do you respond under like some stress? Like, I don't know. It's like you said, stressful enough, but
I love
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I love the story of the guy who wrote Homebrew for OS X. Like, he interviewed at Google and didn't get the job, yet he's built one of the like most successful, most used open source projects that's probably used all across Google. So it's kind of funny where like, if your interview process is knocking out quality people, like you got to change your interview process.
Yeah, I mean, are you a fan of rubrics? Or wow, rubrics.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, like, a standardized sort of set of questions where, I mean, you could always dig in deeper, based off the responses to those set of questions that are standardized. But some people live and die by them. Some people like to make the questions more custom based off the person interviewing, less standardized. What, do you have any thoughts there?
I have like my stock set of questions that I have up on GitHub that I ask people, but it's something like I know like Google, for instance, has like their crazy, data mine set of questions. Like, we ask these 10 questions for this position and a completely different set of questions for a different position. Like, I mean, I never worked in a place that's that well refined, but I have my set of like AppSec specific questions, but they're only to start kind of a conversation to go from there. Like, I want to know if someone's passionate. I want to know if they've done interesting things, and I want to know if they can solve, the problem, not so much if they've done this specific thing or that specific thing. So, I wouldn't call myself very formal. I think the problem is like so much of it comes down to a gut instinct, which can be bad because you can have your own biases for and against things. But I don't know. I haven't seen like a system that works perfectly to hire or fire people. I mean, I've been ranked poorly on job interviews that I know that I did well at the job. So it's like, I've seen it go well and I've seen it go bad. And I've hired people based on gut instincts that didn't work out. So there's no like perfect solution to it. It's just, I don't know. I think the more time you spend communicating with someone, the better idea you'll have of if they're a good fit or not.
Awesome. Good to know. Yeah, it's kind of, I ask that because we do have folks that are both hiring as well as trying to get hired that watch the show, as well as my mom, who, no, I'm kidding.
Your mom doesn't watch this. Come on.
She's the only person that watches this show. Let's be honest. No,
She
but
has like 5 different handles asking questions.
exactly. I set her up with 5 different accounts. So no, but there's people that on both sides that are trying to both find candidates, get into the industry, and so I wanted to make sure that we represent, have some questions, especially coming from you, who like, I guess one thing that's interesting is you've dealt with the perils of going from even managing 5 people at a consulting company is a challenge, but when you get up to like 25 people, there's a whole new set of concerns. So you've seen like sort of like the biggest challenges and experienced them, and I mean, you can speak to those things. Like, I am curious in your opinion, like, what are some of the biggest, challenges that you face is it scheduling? Is it like, just that people aspect, or, what did you walk away with?
The biggest challenge in terms of managing like consulting and that kind of stuff, or?
Yeah, exactly.
Clients. Yep. Everything was great except for the clients.
Can be difficult.
Yeah. No, I mean, consulting, it's true in not just security consulting, but there's always the mismatch between the amount of folks you have on and the amount of work that's coming in. It's either too many people and not enough work, or too much work and not enough people. And that's especially hard when the field of people you can hire in security and AppSec specifically is not super deep. So it's tough to keep that pipeline of good folks out there and like ready to jump on if you need more people as you're growing. But that's hugely important, is to have a good feel for who's out there in the industry, develop relationships for, when it comes time to hire more people. And I think having a good brand for your company is really important too, and showing that you know what you're talking about, and just going out and meeting people is definitely important. I mean, I think it's some of the things we did well in our previous roles, and it's definitely a hard thing to do. It has to happen like very organically. Like, you can't hire headhunters to go out there and get your pipeline full of good security people ready to go. Like, I've never worked with a recruiter who's worth the money for security, at least. So,
yeah, I think in my career, right, like hiring people and interviewing people, like, I think we've had one successful candidate come through a headhunter, right? And that was years and years ago. And even then, we almost didn't hire him, and we hired somebody else alongside him that came through a kind of a normal process. And the one that came through the headhunter was more junior, but his mindset was better, and he turned out to be the better employee, right? Like, it's just like this crapshoot that's what you're talking about, right? But
yeah.
My favorite part was when headhunters would unsolicited send emails with resumes, and the only thing redacted was like the personal contact details, but like everything else was there. And Mike, I remember us specifically, we'd go, like, you go Google, and Seth even, like, we'd go Google and be like, oh yeah, this is so-and-so, our friend who like works down the way at the other place. Yeah.
Recruiters are a whole thing. I mean, I don't want to insult every one of them, because there's plenty of good ones, but yeah, that's a frustrating area to deal with, because it's just never been that fruitful to use recruiters for security positions. So,
you know what, if there's one thing I think we could leave people about consulting as customers and clients, don't schedule in Q4. Stop doing that. Like, don't wait till the end of the year. You people are nuts.
yeah,
you're celebrating Christmas now, so you can get out of the way. So in Q4, you can be busy. That's a good idea. Very forward thinking.
Very forward thinking.
If you want to use your budget, but like you want to use your budget intelligently, you can always get discounts in like Q1 and Q2, because that's when all the work dries up, because everybody is like spent all their money in Q4. So legitimately, like, if you have an AppSec program, spend your money during the first 6 months, and make sure or even, I guess, what would you guys say? Maybe it was more of like, because that stuff bleeds into Q1. So I almost say like Q2.
Q2. Yep.
Yeah.
March to June is your best time to actually find AppSec consultants that are, top notch, that we've been super busy the rest of the year, and that's when it all dries up. So
yeah,
and I would say across the security industry as a whole. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, otherwise you're getting consultants who are double billed and traveling across the country, and half asleep when they're doing assessments for you. That's how it is. At least you guys know at the big places.
Yeah, that's a
smaller
dirty
places, I
little.
think
Yeah, it's a dirty little secret. You can get a discount, and you can really drive the price down, and you get better, more focused consultants. But you just can't get that in Q4 ever.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I can't. I can't tell you the number of like on a daily basis right now that of people that are reaching out asking for availability, and I'm like, look, I told you 6 weeks ago that Q4 was going to be bad. 2 months ago, and you're still reaching out right now. It's just not going to be. It's not going to happen, right? Unless you're willing to pay some insane rate, which no one wants to do. They still want to pay like the discounted price when availability is not there. So
yeah. I feel like everyone is waiting to the end of the year because they don't feel like getting the bad news until the last minute, and that's what we bring.
It's always about money. It's always we got some money left over, and it's just we have to use it or lose it, and it's just like plan better, and you can get better uses of your money, and you can stretch that budget farther. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so client schedule. I assume scheduling was I know scheduling was always an issue for you. Not for you personally, but it's an issue that comes up quite a bit just for any manager. I'm trying to think. Was there anything else that any lessons learned that you want to share with anyone? You're good.
Yeah, I'm good. No, I mean, consulting, I think like with anything, you got to know what you're going to get out of it. If you're going to consulting, you're not going to always get to tinker with the coolest stuff. If you're in consulting, like sometimes you're just digging trenches, and those trenches are reading a million lines of Java, and at first that's cool and that's a great learning experience. But when you go into consulting, it's like, it's work all the time, and it becomes pretty formulaic, and you can get really good at doing consulting, but your horizon is only going to be as wide as what your clients are doing. So just know that going into it. It can be a really good place to learn, especially starting out, but it's good to know when to get out of that area too and go internal. Consultants are the worst. People who've only done consulting or red teaming or pen testing are probably the worst security people in the industry, because they don't have any idea how hard it is just to patch an operating system or deploy a new line of code out to production. And they think that if the dumb developer just did this or just did that, everything would be so much easier. So do consulting for a while, shift internal, do internal for a while, shift back to consulting. I think that's the way to go. Both have their pluses and minuses, but neither one gives you the full picture of what the world actually looks like.
Yeah, when someone's done development, like been a developer, and then they've done the consulting side or vice versa, internal, and also have the consulting. So the consulting, the internal, and the developer standpoint, like that's a pretty well-rounded individual. It's somebody who's going to bring some value and depth to your program. So shifting onto that topic of AppSec programs, like, can you give, because you've done this, can you give like a 30, 60, 90-day plan on, you're brand new and you got to get off the ground and you got to build an AppSec program. Like, what do you do in that 30, 60, 90-day period? What are the things you focus on? What are sort of your tips for that?
I mean, I think for the first 30 days, you don't do anything. As in, you don't like walk in and start saying, here's how we're going to do this, here's how we're going to do that. Like, if you're working in a big org, the first 30 days, you should be just meeting with people and getting people to know your face and the faces of the people on your team, especially if you're going into a place that didn't have a security team before, or they don't have a very not a very mature company or security team. A lot of places just purely use consultants. They do app tests once a year, and that's like their security. So I think the first 30 days, you just meet with people, you learn the business, you learn how things operate, what the tech is, how code gets deployed, how big the team is, who's responsible for what. Because if you do that stuff post, you start doing source code analysis, you start doing test of apps, like you're just going to have all these findings sitting out there. You don't know who to go to. You're going to have an incident. You're not going to know who's the person who owns that app. You're not going to know how to figure out, not going to know who you have to talk to get new code deployed. So I think the big thing is just like going into it and just listening and to learning the organization. Like, never, security people shouldn't try to shape the organization around them. They shouldn't be like, okay, here's how you guys are going to do this from here on out. It should be always the opposite, like listening and warning how things are done. And you can make improvements to it, but you got to start with like at least understanding how stuff is done and why it's done that way. 60 days, I think then you figure out, you know what the org looks like, you know who everyone is, you know how they do things. Then you figure out how you feel like you could best fit into the program. Like, is that just pen testing and handing off results? Is that implementing static analysis into people's pipelines? Is that training? You know, figuring out what your plan is, and it's going to be different in different places. Like something's going to be more effective than others. If you're using all COTS products, you can't really do static analysis because you don't have the code. You have outsourced developers. You can't do training. You know, so you got to figure out what works best, and then socializing that and getting buy-in. Because again, like you can have the best ideas, best plans, best security technology, but if you don't know who to talk to, and you don't get the buy-in for doing those things, it doesn't really matter. It goes like nowhere, and you're just, swimming upstream the entire time. And then I think the last 90 days is when you really like start doing the work, and you start, implementing what you want to implement, trying to get stuff integrated. I mean, I think that's like a high level. That doesn't even like really answer your question, but I think it's because the question isn't like how you like, do you use static analysis in the pipeline, or do you do just pure pen testing, or you just do training? Like, I don't think that's not the answer. That's not like the question. It's, it's more of a organizational one more than it is more of a people and organizational one than a like tech question, in my view.
No, I actually think that answers it perfectly. And we've mentioned this before, but it's funny how most of the time when someone's never built or from what I've witnessed in my anecdotal evidence of this, people that have not built an AppSec program before focus primarily on like bugs, and like maybe some threat modeling, but that's also focused on like threat modeling towards like bugs. But it's not, that's what they think makes up an AppSec program. And the reality is that it isn't. I mean, that's a small part of it. It's odd, but it is a small part of it because there's so much else to do. And I think that's a great, for what it's worth, I think that's a great approach to get to know Ken. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm just sharing a little holiday spirit there with you, Mike.
You're so jolly. So jolly.
So jolly. I mean, you can't match my level of jolly and professionalism.
Yeah.
So, but no, yeah, I think getting to know the key stakeholders, getting to know who owns or who to talk to, how what's the organizational structure, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would say at 120 days, you should talk about what you've done. So no one likes creating PowerPoints. No one likes doing metrics. At least, no hackers like to sit there in Excel and figure out, what your metrics looks like. No one wants to create presentations, but like, I've never seen more effective security than in a company where executives are well informed about what the actual risk is. So like putting on your business pantsuit and going up to the top floor with your PowerPoints, like that's, like, it doesn't matter if you have the best security tech and the best security team, it doesn't really matter if no one knows. And so you have to be an advocate for your team and for what you've done. I mean, as like a security leader, that should be probably one of the biggest things you do. And then present risk at a high level of what the issues are. And then take that and either get resources for it or get buy-in to accept the risk. But like, people have to know what you're doing. You can't just be throwing bugs in the Jira and assuming everyone like thinks that security is operating well. So
I dropped a little pantsuit imagery in our Slack there, our AppSec Slack for you, Mike.
That mysterious.
It was either going to be Arrested Development or Michael Scott.
Yep.
Michael Scott in The Office. That time he wore a woman's pantsuit.
Yep.
Good times. Well, so Seth, I think we have to start wrapping it up. We've been on for a bit.
Yeah, we've been on for over an hour at this point. Like, it always goes so quick. Obviously, Mike, thanks for coming on. Right,
Sure.
Before you go, any last minute thoughts? Like, what's your current favorite, application security tool that you're using?
That's a good question. AWS command line.
Sweet.
People are
So
hating.
you do. So you do have Linux on your resume. Then that's what you're saying is.
Yeah, I have something like that.
Okay.
I mean, it's
good.
mine's only 4.5 pages though. It's not 5. So
Oh, so well then you're
Lame.
good. You're good.
yeah, but I have a lot of infographics, and I also have a Excel spreadsheet embedded in my resume, so people know the full story.
Oh, so you've got links to documents inside of your resume that they have to click on. Is that
I went enterprise.
you went enterprise?
You're on the naughty
obviously.
list.
Sweet. No, but thanks for coming on. Right, like we'll have you back on because it's this has gone by way too quick. Obviously there's still stuff that we could talk about, either on the cloud security side or the the AppSec side, and talking people through how to get into security. It's always a good thing. So,
yeah.
Ken, did we have anything else that we need to cover? I did order T-shirts.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good. Yes. Bring that up, please. Yes.
Well, are they tank tops or are they t-shirts? Because if they're
No,
t-shirts, send them back.
They're V-neck tank tops. Yeah.
V-neck crop top
tank tops.
Or tank tops.
Yeah, there you go.
They're like those things the guys wear at like Muscle Beach, like not really there, but they're
Yeah.
great. Now I have that image of Ken in my head. That's
fat guy in a little shirt.
Ken, do you flex at every mirror you see?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I suck in my gut. That's what I do.
Yeah. Other than that, I think, so once those get in, we'll start sending them out, especially to people that have been on the show, right? That's going to be the initial wave. We'll send them out to everybody because we have like 30 people, Ken, that we need to send them to. I didn't even think about that.
Yep.
Other than that, the training in AppSec Cali, Ken and I will be doing our excellent adventures again in code review. So if you're interested or you're going to be there, let us know. Mike, what other conferences are you going to be out if people would like to connect with you?
I'll probably be at AppSec Cali. And so actually, Rinaldi, Rampen, and I are probably putting on a small conference here in Virginia next year called AppSec. So we run a local group called Nova Beer Sec, which is just like a informal get together. And so we're going to put on a informal conference, which is 50% security talks, 50% beer. And I hear the great Ken Johnson may be speaking there.
And 100% magic.
I'll come.
Hopefully he'll have a shirt on, or at least 3/4 of a shirt.
Whatever gets the people going, man. Whatever gets the people going.
Yeah. So we're trying to figure out dates for that. It's going to be informal, but we're hoping to have some good speakers and then just some good beer. So, cool. Yeah. Then AppSec USA is going to be out here next year as well.
Awesome. When are you going to announce is that going to be like in the new year sometime? You guys are going to announce the conference?
What, AppSec?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, probably early next year. It's not going to be like there's not going to be a huge CFP process and all that stuff. It's going to be informal. So people want to show up. It'll be cheap and easy to get to. Yeah,
kind of like that unconf idea that our Ruby Arlington people put on.
Yeah. The unconference, like you just show up and you can do a talk about something.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably less structured than what you're looking for, but it's probably still the same vibe where it's more like hobbyist versus like vendor sponsored.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I did the OWASP thing for a while, and that's like too formal. It's not always very much fun. So, want to do something more chill.
Makes sense.
Good deal. All right. Well, find Mike on Twitter as well, or in our Slack channel. He's all over the place, and we can't seem to get rid of him. So, well, thanks for coming on.
Sure. Thanks
finally.
For having me.
Yeah. Anything else, Ken, before we wrap it up? I think we lost him.
Yeah, we're just stuck with that beautiful face.
Yes, exactly. Well, yeah, thanks again, Mike. Stay on, but we'll talk to everybody next week. And in the meantime, good AppSecing out there. We'll see everybody soon.
Thanks.